I would like to call this Germantown Board of Education meeting to order at 7 o'clock. I'd like you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand if you're able. Official meeting notification. Mr. Stousel.
Yes, public notice of all meetings has been given by communication from the superintendent's office to the public, to those news media who have requested such notices, and to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Northwest Now, Express News, and West Bend Daily News. Public notice has also been posted on the schools throughout the district and on the gsdwi.org website, as well as cable access channel 96.
Okay, roll call. Mrs. Renman.
Soderberg.
Here.
Medved.
Here.
Loth.
Here.
Borden.
Here.
Barney.
Here.
Myself here. And Pollock.
Here.
Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Number 3, citizen comments. We do have people signed up tonight. First on the list, Ellen Gottry. Goldtree?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to begin by reading a short speech given by an African-American woman that spoke in regard to CRT at a board meeting recently in London County, Virginia, as I feel that she explains it much more eloquently than I can. The woman began by quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She says, "In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." She then goes on to say, "Now I have a dream that we will implement love, not hate, or supporting another Jim Crow's agenda. CRT is not a nice dialogue. It was a tactic that was used by Hitler and the Ku Klux Klan on slaveries many years ago to dumb down my ancestors so we could not think for ourselves. CRT is racist, it is abusive, it discriminates against one's color. Let me educate you. An honest dialogue does not oppress. An honest dialogue does not implement hatred and injustice. It's to communicate without deceiving people. Today we don't need your agreement. We want action and a backbone for what we ask for today, to ban CRT. We don't want your political advertisement to divide our children or belittle them. Think twice before you indoctrinate such racist theories. You cannot tell me what is or is not racist. Look at me. I had to come down here today to tell you to your face that we are coming together and we are strong. This will not be the last greeting me. Respectfully, the speech ends here. Like I have mentioned in the last 2 meetings, my family escaped Hitler during World War II and escaped communism years later. It truly breaks my heart that it appears to be coming full circle, and that my 84-year-old father and my 80-year-old mother need now to worry about their own grandchildren being indoctrinated like they were so many years ago. CRT and all ideologies that incorporate like-minded, divisive philosophies need to be banned from our schools. We must have full transparency and representation from all sides if the ACE committee continues. It cannot be one-sided. If this does not happen, ACE needs to be banned immediately. Segregation in our schools is simply not okay. Lastly, I sent an email to the entire school board and Brett expressing my concerns regarding the school climate questionnaire that ACE wants to distribute to our student. Once again, sadly, I did not receive a response. There are many things wrong with it. For example, point B states, quote, "Do students choose to interact primarily with people most like themselves?" And students need to respond on a 5-point scale, with 1 being strongly agree and 5 being strongly disagree. Given the majority of our students are Caucasian, 81.8% is stated on the equity section of our website. Just by basic math, they most likely interact with people most like themselves. Or maybe they possibly interact with other students that play soccer, participate in theater, or perhaps are in band. This is a leading question purposely included to twist the outcome and conclude that Germantown is in fact a racist community. This is nothing short of CRT and wokeness, and since the board has promised the community that CRT will only be included in 2 AP classes, I can't imagine that the board will allow this to be distributed to our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ina Turner.
Hi. Ina Turner. Last time I spoke about how we, the parents, need to teach our kids to love thy neighbor, love our country, and defend our freedom. I would now like to expand on that. This school district has a moral duty to teach math, science, English, and history. It is not the school district's duty to teach our kids what to think and to make them believe that America is a racist country, nor is it their responsibility to define our kids by their race, their skin color, their gender, and their religion. This is exactly where the new ACE committee is determined to take the school district, starting with this crazy school climate questionnaire containing nothing but bias and baiting questions. This survey is directly from an organization that recently changed its name, conveniently, from Teaching Tolerance to Learning for Justice, to clearly fit their indoctrination agenda, and has hidden their CRT agenda under the name of Critical Practices for Anti-Bias Education. Surprise, surprise, that this organization is linked directly to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which, according to the Washington Post, has lost all credibility after years of smearing good people with false charges of bigotry, and was recently sued and forced to issue an apology and pay $3.4 million to a leading critic of the radical Islamist ideology. This association is not what we, the parents and taxpayers, want for this school. Their survey, with all one-sided, biased questions, is designed and written specifically to evoke answers that will paint the picture they want. And that picture is to paint your school district as racist, which opens the door for the ACE committee to bring in their agenda to further embed the concept of systemic racism, reverse discrimination, and hate for our country into foundation of this school. This committee must not be allowed to proceed with zero transparency and a one-sided agenda by a group of individuals with one shared ideology and goal, and that is to do everything in their power to paint this school district of Germantown as racist, non-inclusive, and in need of fixing. Instead, this board, the superintendent, and the director of teaching and learning must prioritize excellence, which inspires students from all racial backgrounds to achieve their full potential. So we, the parents, today choose education excellence over indoctrination by ACE.
Krista Ewert.
We need the school board's help to rebuild the trust that has been lost between the community and school administrators. Parents continue to bring to light issue after issue, and we are met with silence and half-truths. For example, the teacher in service that was used to push hateful ideas from the book Me and My White Supremacy. No one from the administration has publicly explained the intent of the training. Through FOIAs, we have discovered Brenda O'Brien has stated that 2 teachers asked for the training and were willing to lead it, but both opted out of school this year prior to the training taking place. Instead of this training being scrapped, Ms. O'Brien reached out to Ubuntu in an attempt to have them conduct the training. In an email from Brett O'Brien to Ubuntu, staff stated the ultimate goal was to create building-level action plans around improving the school experience through different lenses, policies, procedures, discipline practices, etc. She further directed Ubuntu staff that her budget for the training was to be no more than $3,000. From this information, Ubuntu responded with a project proposal that cost $3,500, which included Radical accountability for creating equity, known as RACE framework, that challenges systemic oppression, and it manifests within programs, policies, and procedures within an organization. This does not sound like a failure of an overworked employee to understand what the original two teachers were proposing, but the work of a highly agendized and active participant in the implementation of CRT in our teachers' pedagogical philosophy. To further illustrate this, look at more of her actions outlined in a report published by the McIver Institute last week titled Critical Race Theory in Wisconsin K-12 Education. The article highlights an October email in which Brenda O'Brien provides teachers with a link to socialjusticebooks.org. This website provides hundreds of books geared toward elementary students on CRT-based topics, including books such as Rise Up, The Art of Protest, What We Believe, a Black Lives Matter Principles Activity Book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, What Does It Mean to Be White? Developing White Racial Literacy, Different but Beautiful, White Fragility for Kids. She asked teachers to review the list and advise her of any they would like to add to their curricular topics. She also goes on to give advice to staff on how to teach social justice to their students. In order to rebuild the trust of the parents and community, I'm asking the board to find a way to provide real-time transparency on student curriculum and what is being presented to the teachers. Thank you.
Sarah Larson.
Good evening. Just 3 quick items. The first one is historically the courses have been added to the district without eliminating, and so in the December-January timeframe, we talked about as the courses for the high school were being looked at, that we would be eliminating courses with like 12 or fewer enrollees. And so I'm asking for a report out at one of the July meetings because at that point, the schedule should be pretty much set as to how many courses are being eliminated and what that approximate budget savings is anticipated to be. The second item is with heightened parental awareness and desire to participate, I'd like to see the teacher and administration interview process revised to include 3 parents or community members and scale back on the ancillary staff that participates in the interview process. I recommend advertising the opportunity in Express News and on the school board website to generate a deep list so that we can put it in a rotation, and I would then like to see them participate in the interview process beginning with all interviews after August 1st. Last meeting, I indicated that I'd like all of the curriculum and resources to be posted on our website to avoid the flare-ups and mistrust that's developing in the community. And so to do this, I would like a date established as to when we would anticipate all the curriculum and resources being up on the website. I know resources are limited, and that's a daunting task. I would recommend that now that the website is up and running, perhaps the person who's doing that spearhead this and start organizing what that's going to be. I am willing to get a group of volunteers together to help with uploading all of those materials. I don't think you're going to find that you will have a shortage of volunteers. Let's be on the front side of this and show other districts how it's done. Thanks.
Scott Hepley.
Good evening and thank you. Just a couple quick points. I know we have a lot to cover tonight. The first one is, and I don't know, I come to every meeting, but sometimes it gets late and I don't know what's passed and what's not passed. So I'm not sure if a decision was made that we're going to go down from 2 meetings to 1, board meetings. I think that's a bad idea in light of what's going on where you have a bunch of engaged parents. I thank them for all being here. I mean, I've been coming to board meetings for over a year, and at times it was Mr. Pollock and myself and very few others. So the more the merrier. I know the board has asked for people to come and speak their minds, so it's great that they're here. I not want to reduce their ability to speak now that they're engaged. It really doesn't matter why or how they're engaged and they're here, and I think you need to listen to them, okay? And I feel that's part of good communication and good transparency. You say you want to do that, well, this is a great way to do that. So again, I don't know if the decision was made, but I'm hoping that we can keep it 2 board meetings. Second point is budget-related. Not sure, I know you're going to talk about it later, but it's my understanding that we're going to cut a school resource officer from Kennedy Middle. And again, if I'm wrong, I will come back and say I'm wrong, but my knowledge of it is that the village covers most of that person's salary through the police department. So I don't know how we're saving all this money that's on there. You guys know more than I do, but I like having school resource officers. I definitely think the high school one should never be talked about ever. But middle school, I think they're very helpful for disciplinary reasons and other things, and having them there makes me feel safe. I don't know how the other parents feel, but that's how I feel about it. Then in regards to the, we always talk about, the board talks about, well, it's all about the kids, okay? It is about the kids, but you know what? It's also about the families, okay? These kids have parents. We're the parents. And I'm a big one on semantics because I was raised by 2 teachers. One of them happened to be an English teacher that taught K-12. So words are one thing, but actions are what speak louder, as everyone knows. So I like seeing action. I just don't want words out there. Oh, we're doing this, and we did this, and we're great, and we do all this. Show it by action. Show it by meaning. Show that you stand behind the words that you put out there. And, I've been coming here for a year. I mean, people probably think I'm complaining about everything, but I'm just pointing out that when I hear certain words like, we're visionaries, okay? You don't assign yourself being a visionary. People decide you're a visionary. Let's work with that. Let's be action-oriented. The last thing I'll say is, I'm probably speaking for myself, but I am getting really tired of Germantown being the focus of the week on the Mark Belling show, okay? People are sending me the podcast. It's driving me nuts, all right? And I understand we've done some battles with Mr. Belling. The AU thing that went on last year, the swim coach thing. I don't know what else is going on, but, why are we feeding the beast? Mark Belling got a big audience, and, if you just poke the bear, he's going to keep finding ways to talk about us. I don't want Mark Belling to be talking about us as a focus of his show every day. I don't know about you guys, but I think that makes us look bad. So I would hope that this board decides to just not get in fights with Mark Belling. I just don't think it's good for us. Thank you.
Jody Graff.
Evening. Well, I'm saddened to hear of more and more families exploring or having already committed to leave GSD or even Germantown as a whole. I'm so thankful for the positive messages from endless families and teachers who are so grateful to be making the choice to mask or not mask. We additionally look forward to your continued trust and empowerment to end contingencies on quarantining and allow parents to responsibly monitor their children. Applauding your decision to no longer restrict student body health freedoms, the overwhelming majority of students and staff have exercised their right to not mask, as was also shown in the unmasked happy smiles at graduation yesterday. Thank you for giving those students, the seniors and families, the graduation that they deserved, as well as an end-of-year experience for each district student as they make the right choice for their own body. We hope you'll step up to ensure this opportunity for the graduating 8th graders as well. As most don't contact you, it was amazing for you to see where the silent majority stands. Please know the majority also stands for equality and looks forward to your commitment to stop all discriminatory, categorizing, and political teaching and increase transparency. As anyone, particularly young families, leaving the district would like to ensure Germantown Middle and/or High School are still viable options when the time comes to again make a choice on proudly enrolling in the district. I'd like to positively acknowledge that there is already anti-discrimination efforts in GSD policy, but we'd like to continue asking for the following to be added to the employee handbook, as well as posted on the district website as follows. The Germantown School District believes in equality for all students. To ensure district personnel, students, and parents are working from the shared understanding, we all vow to execute the below items in order to best promote equality in the classroom. Regarding race, color, ethnicity, gender, sex, national origin, religion, ability, or age, teachers and staff shall, 1, not direct or compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to one of these characteristics or groups as being inherently superior or inferior to another. So all students are equal and deserve equal opportunity without segregation or categorizing. Teachers and staff shall, 2, ensure that individuals do not receive adverse treatment on the basis of one of these characteristics, nor promote adverse treatment of people based on one of these characteristics. So again, all students are equal and deserve equal treatment. Lastly, teachers and staff shall not direct or compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to being inherently responsible for actions committed by members of their shared characteristic group, and not classify nor call out to distinguish students on account of any of these characteristics. So all students are equal, responsible for their own behavior, not to be classified nor defined by any personal characteristic, rather only by their character. So I think these are all things that we can unarguably get behind as a community. Thank you for your dedication to our students and community.
Thank you. Alyssa Powell.
At last school board meeting, it was discussed that the material from the ACE committee would become readily available soon on the new district website. I checked the site today, and I am still not able to find any new information. There is no information regarding meeting agendas, how, where, or when to attend the meetings, and no posting of meeting minutes or action items. The lack of transparency with the ACE committee is leading to growing frustrations and is building more distrust within the community. To learn that the ACE committee has subcommittees within itself seems to be that this group is growing well beyond the intent it was originally formed for, and I worry that the board has lost sense of control with this group. I again ask that there be prompt transparency with this group, and if that cannot happen, then the group should be disbanded. As for critical race theory, I feel it is important to point out that the majority of CRT teaching will not go by the name of CRT. Instead, it has many other warm-sounding names, such as equity, culturally responsive teaching, social justice, and intersectionality, to name a few. So while we know on paper that CRT is taught in 2 AP classes, the pedagogy of CRT extends much farther in our classrooms. When reading the book Critical Pedagogy, the opening sentence states, "Education is a political act." That sentence alone should concern you and should bring into question the entire ideology and practice of this pedagogy. I recommend to the board that you develop a CRT reporting form, which was recently developed by a parent in the Elmbrook School District. It is a simple Google Doc form that allows parents to report any questionable material that their child is bringing home. This document can link to all of your emails. You can receive the responses in real time. At the end of the day, if CRT is truly only being taught in 2 classes, then this should be a relatively easy thing to implement and you will not be bombarded with emails. I still remain concerned for the teaching in service last spring when they discussed the book Me and My White Supremacy. I ask that moving forward, the board should have more involvement in the material that is discussed. If we need to hold future diversity training sessions, I would like to recommend 2 sources. The first is Unity Training Solutions, which is founded by Dr. Carol Swain. Her program focuses on building strong teams by respecting individual talent and providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories. The second is a theory of enchantment. This is founded by Chloe Valdari. She has developed an innovative framework for compassionate anti-racism that combines social emotional learning, character development, and interpersonal growth. I encourage all of you to please watch her TED Talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Thierleman.
Hi, thank you. First, I'd like to thank each of you for your service to the community. I recognize you are being presented with a multitude of requests and commentary. In the interest of delivering on the transparency which the board and district speak of, I am requesting that the district add a section to our website which includes the following information dating back to calendar year 2020 and going forward. Staff professional development calendar, indicating dates, planned topics, recommended and required reading lists, and links to any PowerPoints and handouts utilized. In-service day calendar, indicating planned activities at each school and links to any resource materials utilized for group activities. School and district annual goals, indicating what each school site and administrative area will be focusing on for the year, planned action steps, and recap of results at year end. Hopefully by sharing this information, it will help alleviate community concern. I would also like to propose a transparency committee of parents and community members who can assist in making all curriculum and teacher in-service materials available for public viewing. I am confident that you will find many volunteers just in this room alone. In regards to quarantines for close contacts, please vote to make this parent choice. Parents should continue to monitor their children if identified as a close contact for symptoms of illness. The goal here is to prevent healthy children from missing in-person school and to avoid discrimination based on mask use. In the future, I expect you will ensure students are not discriminated against for vaccine status as well. Thank you.
Diane Peterson.
You get two for the price of one. No, I'm teasing. First impressions are rarely what they seem. Coca-Cola recently put their employees through diversity training. They told workers to act less white. Maybe management should try to act less stupid. Disney forced their employees to fill out a white checklist to show their white privilege. I hear there might be a checklist for Germantown students. Ms. O'Brien told teachers to read a woke book and then asked them to tell her how they'll implement that ideology in their class. You and these parents have learned CRT is being taught, in 2 classes. We've heard many students tell their story at the April meeting. Here's my story. Born into a working class family with no money, we lived paycheck to paycheck, grew up in a rental house. I was asked to help the first black girl in my grade school class learn her way around school as I did for other new students. I had many black friends in Milwaukee West Division High School. One girl said her family moved to Milwaukee from the South because her father, who's a teacher, was threatened when trying to encourage black friends to vote. I told her, I said, everyone has the right to vote. Guess not in liberal South, and that's how naive I was. I finished high school, got a job, paid my bills. My husband and I often worked 2 jobs to save for our home. Yes, we too have a budget, like you have a budget on the agenda tonight. I completed Alverno College and weekends at 48 years of age while working a full-time job. Never used illegal drugs, worked 62 years, and I lived and still live a very modest lifestyle. Now today, I endure idiot liberals and race hustlers telling me that I'm a racist due to my white privilege? I guess not. The board may have innocently thought the idea of equity, CRT, and other ideas were ways to solve bullying, as I heard at the April meeting. Now you have learned the truth about what CRT and equity is. Some might say you screwed up, but there is time to stop it. The buck stops with the board approval as noted in your policy 2220. You decide the final course that is taught here. If you believe teaching CRT and other things like that is acceptable, then you are the oppressors since you are the decision makers. In biblical terms, you're allowing Satan to enter Germantown curriculum. You stand self-condemned. You are not acting consistently with the truth of the U.S. Constitution by supporting socialism. If you support CRT, which intends to have race as the lens of life, and you are white, then that demonstrates you are the oppressors. If you accept that fact, then continue CRT. But if you disallow that fact, then you have to abolish it. You cannot have it both ways. There is no common ground here. This curriculum is too expensive for your budget. Thank you.
Jean Mary?
I have reviewed the suggested tolerance survey for students. It seems that it's designed to denote the school district as racist. The particular problem is in the first section. Item B is a glaring issue. Quote, students choose to interact primarily with people most like themselves, unquote. Since this can be interpreted any number of ways, who wouldn't circle one? Strongly agree. I would. Put me in a group of people, and I will gravitate toward anyone who travels internationally or loves skiing or gardening, because those people are most like me. I don't care if they're pink, purple, orange, or whatever. Kids are no different. It is a question designed to be distorted. When I left teaching, I went into marketing, and this is what's called a loaded survey. It is designed to provide a particular outcome, in this case, labeling the district as racist to justify a CRT and equity teaching approach. The other clue is in the footnotes. Those are important. According to those notes, the survey is adapted from tolerance.org and mixitup.org. Both are LGBTQ organizations, and from the Sacramento, California Unified School District website. Seriously? We're not able to find a more mainstream and Midwest resource? Why would we source a survey for this district from a state and from organizations that are known for pushing a particular agenda? If we find it necessary to survey our students, let's at least find objective sources that will give legitimate results. Better yet, skip the survey and spend more time teaching students about other cultures, nationalities, and religions. Give them the ability to understand and appreciate differences, rather than using those differences to label and categorize them. Teach them about our Constitution and our system of government, so they not only know what their rights are, but also what their responsibilities are in preserving our freedoms and making our country a better place. The latter will never be achieved by disparaging or destroying what we have. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you all for speaking tonight. Just to clarify some of my comments from the last meeting, I think I tried to lighten the mood, and I tried to make a joke about the 15 minutes. I was also going to reference Mrs. Larson's comments about how we sat here for years without any public comment. Mr. Heffley spoke tonight, and he also said there was the past several years, we were here and there was never anyone in the audience. If we had one or two parents, that was a lot. If we had anyone speak, that was rare. So that was what I was trying to reference. I made a joke, it fell flat, lesson learned. I won't do that again. So just to explain myself. Someone else asked in the audience, who is this guy? And I think a little more background on me is probably appropriate as well. I don't usually like to talk about myself, so I didn't bring this up in my last introduction. But I've been around in this fight for a long time. Back in 2013, when we rejected Common Core as a board, and that the majority of the board was around at that time, we knew what was going on in the curriculum around the country. A big part of rejecting Common Core was because we saw that there was stuff coming into our curriculum that was politicized, that was indoctrination, that was leaning. So that is the reason we rejected Common Core. In 2015, because of what Germantown had done, I actually wrote an essay in a book called Common Ground on Common Core, where several people from both sides of the aisle rejected the idea of Common Core for the same reasons. So I've been in this fight for a long time. In 2017, I tried to get a common sense educator elected to the Department of Public Instructions in Madison. I learned very quickly how evil politics at the state level are and how corrupt they are. And unfortunately, not enough people were paying attention at that time that we weren't able to get a common sense educator in DPI to start fixing these problems at the state level. So I hope that all of you at some point will look to that when the next DPI election is and fight to save the state education system, because a lot more needs to be done. So just to give you a little more background on me, I literally wrote the book on how to fight back against bad school boards. And I hear what you're saying. And I think this board in general, if there was anyone in this district that I believed was working against us and was trying to indoctrinate our children, I would be actively seeking to remove them. So I'm paying attention. We're all paying attention. I think everyone needs to know that and understand that. Thank you. Item 4, May 24th, 21, Board of Education minutes. Do I have a motion, please?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with one correction. In line 13, we amended the motion and then voted on the amendment. So line 14 should be us voting on the amended motion, not the original motion.
Correct. Do we have that? Okay.
Hey, Brian. One more item, if Tom's done.
Okay.
I'm finished.
You have a correction?
Well, I just, reading line 18 about the ad hoc curriculum that we discussed. Well, it doesn't come right out and say anything was approved in that section of the board meeting. By the time we get to the end of item 18, it sounds like some of this is going to be done. You know, it's just the way it's written. So I'd like to add a line for number 18 that all these items were discussed, but none were approved. You know, just to make sure that we're clear on what's happening here.
Okay. Anyone else? Did I get a second?
Well, I can include that as part of my original motion.
Okay.
And then you can look for a second.
Okay.
So,
Tom's
yeah.
including that? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mike seconds. Any discussion further?
Yeah, just, you know, the reason why I brought that up, the last sentence of number 18, for example, it says, book lists and policies will also be readily available on the website. We didn't approve any of that. You know, we just didn't. So, you know, by the time you get to this end of this paragraph, it sounds like, you know, all of this is going to be implemented. You know, it's just a little unclear.
Okay.
So thanks.
Okay. I have a second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. May 24th, 2021 closed session minutes. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the May 24th closed session minutes.
I'll second.
Bob? Any discussion?
There's a typo on line 2. I don't think Mr. Varney is called Mr. Carney, but it's a typo. I don't know if that's relevant or not.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Or opposed? That passes. Reports and information items. Middle school circles pilot class. Mr. Stousland.
Yeah, thank you. So Carrie Berg, if you remember, we piloted this circles class, and she talked a little bit about it at one of our April meetings, and we didn't have a chance for the video, so we asked Carrie to come back when we had, because we were at one of the school sites, so we had the better video capabilities here, and so we have a short video, and then she's going to talk a little bit more about the program, and we'll go from there. You tell me when you want me to start the video.
So tomorrow, our course that we've been piloting this semester has our last session, and as a group of students and myself as the instructor have just really built a strong bond, intellectually seeing the kids strengthen as they set their goals and have open discussion about their strengths and areas of improvement every day has just really been empowering to them. The students themselves just really kind of see they aren't alone, nobody's perfect. We've brought in certain people, even such as like Mr. Cole and Mrs. Clymer, to give interview sessions of kind of how they got to where they are, what were their trials and tribulations, what kept them going when things were kind of down on their luck or in a valley versus a peak in life. So I really just saw them kind of open up to look further into the future and tweak habits that they saw were holding them back, and make changes. So I also previously kind of gave you an update with some review on their grades from Q1, 2, and 3 to just, there were many improvements made for each student. So if anybody wants another copy of that too, you can please let me know. But other than that, the video is kind of my favorite thing to look back on right now. I hope you enjoy it because the kids were excited to make it. I did ask them for the video. It will entail that students were asked to place a symbolic picture on a slide and then write a testimonial on their thoughts thus far about the course, and then we put that together to share to you. So you can take it away, and if you have any questions after it's viewed, please let me know and I can stay around here to answer those.
Thank you.
In circles you have made and shared some great memories. You made each other laugh and have some great times together. Circles should be a course that you can take and have fun in. If you don't have interest in having fun, then this would not be a class for you. I was taking this class, I've become more social and not as quiet. I feel more outgoing to talk with some people.
Ever since I started this class, I raised this class, I was a whole lot to do the meeting, the class, or started away with the class. I love this because it really loves attention, social, and organization. Circles are comprehensive, complete, and active. My social level was really low and I had a bad time in my students. I recently became more aware of my mental habits and especially broken habits. I believe that I'm honestly proud of myself.
Circles is an enjoyable movie because it's a slow way to start the day and it only gives you academic mental to everyone. It helps me by letting me report the day before everything really starts, and others are doing circles when areas of food decision making.
Circles is back for showing things that makes you feel like this is more productive every day. And you have to do what you want for you.
When I have circles in the morning, it helps me begin my day. Also, I like circles because at the beginning of the day, when you like day, that is called an icebreaker. And an icebreaker could be a would you rather, or even a question that works your mind.
I think circles is really beneficial because I am a high scorer in 8th grade. Circles also lightens the mood of the day, and I have an additional motivation to work faster and more. I enjoy circles because it gives you more motivation for your day and to get ready to work. It helps you to be more productive and hardworking. It helps me with all my classes. In math, for the first and second quarter, I both had an F. For the third quarter, I got a B. Thank you, everyone.
So it was really fun for me to watch. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes,
I've watched it a good 15 times, so it warms my heart, and we just really did develop a good bond, and we had a great time, and thank you for the opportunity for me to pilot the course, and I hope to be in further talks to perhaps continue it or maybe expand it. Does anybody have any questions from what they heard or saw, or yes?
I remember when you were here a while back and the board had some good discussion and we approved this. And personally, I just want to apologize to you because I think during that time I said I would love to come and speak to your class. It's been a very challenging year over the last year and a half, and maybe I would have learned a lot by talking to your class and sharing some things, because would have been a good discussion. So
Yeah,
keep
we
up
did.
the good
We
work.
tried.
Keep
So,
up the good work.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the offer. It was kind of your offer that made me branch out and have other guests come in, including trying to get you in as a guest, but that was actually a really cool tool. Even students' parents were on the list of trying, just out of their stories they would share about their parents and how they struggled and fought through to become successful with being a small business owners and things. So it did open up kind of a great idea that you gave me, so thank you.
Well, I've got a lot of stories to share. So.
Thank you for coming back and sharing that. I think that was great. Anytime we get to hear the students tell their success stories, I think it warms our heart and it helps us know what we're doing. It really means something. So thanks for all your efforts.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this truly was a success story, so thank you for sharing it, and thank you for all of your endless efforts in doing this, and we hope to bring it back and see what we can do to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I would look forward to it, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, 5B, 4K update, Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, I'm going to ask Mrs. O'Brien to talk about where they are in the planning stages. If you remember, we're going to start half-day 4K in the 2022-23 school year. Mrs. O'Brien?
Sure. I had another 4K curriculum meeting this past, or a couple weeks ago, and we actually broke off into some subcommittees. So we have 3 subcommittees who are working on one being the curricular aspect of it, as well as the furniture, fixture, and equipment that would need to go along with outfitting the classrooms. And then that committee is also talking about inclusive practices for our early childhood program that's currently housed at Rockfield, so some of those students would be in the 4K classrooms. We also talked about funding and grant opportunities that are available, especially for startup 4K programs, but also the continuation of some of the activities and events that we would want to do. So doing some community outreach for that, as well as grant funding opportunities. And then the last one is the marketing committee, who met to talk about some of the parent information that would need to be created, as well as some of the marketing that we would want to do in terms of the student handbook or other venues to make sure that our marketing for this program is also very robust, and that we have outreach and that people know about this 4K opportunity for their students.
And what's the target date to start getting marketing material?
We are hoping for the target date of around November, so that then we have registration in January that would coincide with the time that we would also be registering kindergarten students. So we would be registering 4K and kindergarten students targeting the end of January.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, just one comment. It's great to see you're moving this forward. I know the community's been asking for 4K for a long time, so I appreciate the update.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Building committee update from items discussed June 7th, earlier this evening. Tracy.
Thank you. A number of updates were given by Mr. Erickson regarding some Fund 10 projects and facility services. I'll just give a couple of examples. Rooftop chiller here at the high school was repaired. Has been performing without any issues since. There was work done for the roofing here at the high school. Amy Bell wall elevation repairs and County Line Courtyard wall restoration as well, all within, or well within the budget, and there was, I think I had the number hopefully corrected, roughly 28,000 left for that, so that was good to hear. I do want to mention a couple of updates regarding the Kennedy Middle School dugouts. They have been built. Painting will be completed this summer. Want to give a special recognition to Anonymous for taking care of that for us. It is much appreciated. They look great, and I'm sure once the painting is completed, they will even look even better than they already do. Also, at the high school, baseball concessions stand has been constructed. Once again, want to recognize 3 and 2 baseball booster group, and also the Germantown High School construction class students who helped build it. That too looks really nice. Also at the high school, the gazebo railing has been replaced. This was funded by the high school science club and also installed by the construction class students. So once again, thank you to those groups for not only funding it, but also installing it. A couple other things, the high school lower B-wing heating system leak is covered by warranty, will be completed during the early summer. The MacArthur Elementary School Gaga pits will be installed in the near future. Also, we got an update regarding the second shift custodial work or discussions that are being done. They will be ongoing, but Mr. Erickson did provide us a couple updates regarding some of the equipment that they may invest in, GSF may invest in. Also, discussions regarding some of the consumable supplies where we might be able to get some savings or additional savings there, depending on who is able to supply them. Lastly, the committee took action for Rockfield Elementary School to approve and install a traverse rock wall. This is being funded by the PTA, and I think that would be it. Any questions from the group?
Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business, discussion and possible action regarding return to school report, quarantining procedures. Mr. Stelzman.
Yep, and before I jump into this, I want to do a little shout out to Mr. Farron and his high school admin team and the counselors, and Susan Bast and Julie Call for all the work that they did to make graduation a success. It was almost a year ago when, July, that we didn't know if we were going to have school or what was going to happen, and there's been a lot of things that have happened since July and August of last year, but the event itself, when we had 5 tickets a family, it was in the field house. That's the same number of tickets that were issued 2 years ago to families, and it went very smooth, and it was because of their preparation and planning. And it was great to see all the kids, and I think they were very happy to be done with their senior year. So congratulations to the kids and also those that were part of the planning. This is the best. These are the best numbers we've seen all year. This is the burden rates that we show every other week, and we're looking at everything under 50 or 50 and under, and these were in the hundreds. Several more than hundreds last week, and if you remember, way back when we were at 2,000 at one point, and now we're in single or double digits. So the trends are good. And as far as our schools, we have had minimal cases, if any, in most of the schools. And I know we're going to talk quarantining, and just a couple things around that is we've been more concerned with the contact tracing part of it versus the quarantining, meaning we want to make sure that we at least notify parents that your child was within 3 feet, and really regardless if they had a mask on or not, we want them to know. And then with that, we also ask them to watch for symptoms. And if a child has 2 or more symptoms and they were a close contact, we ask them to get a negative test before returning. But that's kind of how we've been operating, and how we hope to operate for the next 2.5 days of school. And Tammy and I, the school nurse, we talked last week about summer school. What does it look like for summer school? And kind of the same approach. We also talked about that if there's, let's say there's 2 cases in a summer school class, that we would just send a letter to the whole family, I mean to all the families, to say, look, just so you're aware there's 2 cases, please, continue to monitor your child's symptoms. The same thing for the fall. We're looking at a similar approach, but also monitoring if for some reason, like we would do with any illness, if it's norovirus or any of those stomach bugs that go around in the flu, that we would have a lower threshold to where we would at least notify all the parents and say, so let's say it's 15%. So if you have 15% of a class that's out or a grade level, we would notify families to say, look, this is what's going on, and families then will choose what to do with their children, or hopefully they'll monitor their symptoms better, and we'll remind them of good hand washing and just good health procedures at that time. Right now, our board policy is at 30%, so if we're at 30%, we shut down a grade level. We haven't reached that since I've been here, even with COVID-19. So we haven't picked if it's 10 or 15%, but we think it's just to alert people of where we're at. So some things that we've been kicking around that topic. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions?
So just to clarify, if you have a student that's a close contact, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, you're treating them the same?
Yeah, we're tracing.
You're tracing them and notifying the parents?
Correct.
And then asking them to monitor for symptoms?
Yep.
Okay.
So we're not mandatory quarantining anyone?
Nope, we're letting families decide right now.
Excellent, thank you.
Mike?
Do we need a motion?
No, that's already been decided.
I don't know. If you feel better with the motion, it's fine, but I think what I would like to do is be able to bring back, at least for for next fall, and I don't need a board motion for it, but if we say, look, if we get to 15% and anything, we're just gonna notify families. It's just a practice. It's not a requirement. It's just something that we think we're trying to get in front of things quicker than we were in previous years. So.
Yeah, I guess we're hopeful that things settle down and we don't get to those levels anymore.
Yeah. So it's totally up to the board what they prefer.
Do you want us to revisit that part, that 15%, or do you want us to decide on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the board's okay with it, I would just bring back and say, here's how we're going to approach this. Because we already have the policy at 30%, but this is just hey, we're at 15, just so everyone knows if in a particular class or grade level, or if a school would get that high. We just communicate early.
Sure. So
Yeah, I think coming back before school starts would be appropriate, and I think seeing what happens in summer school will give us a good gauge as well.
Yeah, our plan was that we would continue to trace in the summer school, regardless, in using the 3-foot rule. Trace, let families know, and then, when talking to Tammy, she said she'd be surprised if we have 2 positive cases in the summer, at summer school. Obviously she could be wrong, but she just doesn't think we'll have that many cases, so.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Mike?
So just to be clear, are we at the point where we are saying quarantining is optional and at the discretion of the student's parents?
I would say the only caveat to that was that if a child who is a close contact is exhibiting 2 or more symptoms, we ask them to get a negative test.
Okay.
So.
And I'd just like to mention one more item. I emailed Tammy earlier today, just in case she wasn't here this evening, and she's not here this evening. So she sent me an email back. I'll just read one short paragraph from her. My question is if we saw any increase in COVID cases in the last 2 weeks, because, of course, we did get some emails criticizing us for that decision making masks optional for the last 2 weeks. Anyway, the paragraph is, as far as COVID numbers go for the last 2 weeks, I believe we only had 2 for the high school in the entire district, but that might be even stretching it. Students and staff alike are all testing negative that need testing. However, the amount of people needed to still get a test is very low. So I think in the last 2 weeks, you know, the numbers have all dropped to just about nothing in the entire district.
Good news.
Yeah.
And I'll just have to say, at graduation yesterday, it was nice to see all the smiling faces.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Item B, discussion and action to approve summer school contracts. Ms. O'Brien.
It's not.
Nope.
You should go before
again.
What was that? Oh,
You're good.
You're on.
I did put an updated list of summer school contracts in your places at the table this evening, and I would ask that you approve those contracts as presented.
Okay, do I have a motion?
And I did remove Diane Saramer. Unfortunately, the Healthcare Academy that usually runs is not running this year. She hopes that it will run next summer.
I'll make a motion to approve the contracts as presented.
Second.
Tom seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Moving on to item C, discussion and action to approve CCIHS for pre-calculus. Ms. O'Brien.
Yes, so on March 8th meeting, I gave an information item that the math department was looking at adding an additional course for a dual enrollment where students could earn college credit as well as high school credit. So they have requested that honors pre-calculus as well as pre-calculus be another college course offering for our high school students. So starting with the 21-22 school year, if approved, we would be offering pre-calculus and honors pre-calculus as a dual enrollment through UW Green Bay, where students could earn both college credit and high school credit for taking that course.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the CCIHS option for honors pre-calculus and pre-calculus beginning with the 2021-2022 school year.
Second? You got it, Tracy.
Tracy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Moving on to item D, discussion and possible action regarding debt refunding options. Brittany?
Yep, so we'll give it to Brittany, and she has Mr. Mike Clark here from Baird, so.
Sure. So on April 26th at the Finance Committee, Mike Clark from Robert W. Baird presented some possible refunding options to the Finance Committee, and then we were going to bring back more communication in what the next process is and the steps that we'll have to take if the board moves forward with this, and the reason behind why we are recommending this. So Mike has a presentation that is in your packet as well as a hard copy at your station. And then we will entertain questions.
Okay, good evening. Since I was here last, we've been kind of working on this refinancing approach. It's something that is a new concept. But before we get into the steps and the new information we have regarding it, I wanted to just kind of review a few things. When I was here in April, we looked at all your debt issuance and kind of talked about the possibilities of refinancing, and they were fairly limited other than the referendum-approved $84 million issue, and that's what we'll be focusing on tonight. So just to kind of review, there's $79.3 million remaining on that issue. Remaining interest cost is $30 million, a little over $30 million. The issue is callable April 1, 27. So under current IRS regulations, we're not able to refinance, a current refinancing where we could use tax exempt rates to replace the existing tax exempt rates you have with lower rates would be a more traditional type refinancing. Right now, the IRS does not allow those advanced refundings, meaning more than 90 days prior to the call date, refundings to take place unless you use taxable rates. So that's why we're not talking about tax exempt rates in this approach, and there's a couple other reasons. The other cost associated with this, the referendum, is where the district falls in the aid formula. And we'll look at a couple slides in a second, they're in your packet, but the district, because of the property wealth behind each member or student in the district, is there's the tertiary, there's a primary aid, which well, not everybody, with few exceptions, everyone gets aid at that primary. The secondary, where the majority of school districts receive additional aid from the state because of the property value and the guarantees that the state sets. Then you get into the tertiary. Well, some districts don't spend to that level, and the district was right on the border up until the point it passed the referendum where its expenditures, because debt cost is part of that calculation, was added to the per pupil expenditures, pushed you well into the tertiary, and so because you're high property value, you actually lose state aid. So for every dollar you spend in this current year, it also costs 45 cents a reduction in aid for every dollar, which has to be made up with levy. So the district, and that was all calculated into the time of the referendum, so that was all part of the projection in terms of the cost. So that's not, I want to make sure that's very clear. But using the low end where the district has been in that tertiary versus the high end, you know, you're looking at probably $38 to $50 million aid loss through the current or the remaining payments of the existing debt. If you go to the next, I'm looking at this slide now. It says October 15 general aid. The chart below is the main thing I wanted to kind of emphasize. Going back to 2016, the district was right around negative 40%. And this last year, in 21, it was negative 45%. You've been in that range over the last several years. I know going back about 12 years, you were about 35%. That's why we included the 35, because it was in your history at some point. But I think given your increased valuation, you're looked at as more wealthy relative to the rest of the state per student, which has pushed you further into the tertiary. And then with the referendum expenditures, it's had a bigger impact in terms of your aid loss. Another way to look at it, I'm on this slide right now, is you see the wide gray bar, that's your valuation per member. And the kind of the whiter line that's kind of going through those wide bars, that's the guarantee level the state provides. So if your valuation per member is below that line, you receive more support from the state. If it's above that line, again, pushes you into that negative aid where they take aid away. Again, it increases the levy to the community. The next chart, I won't really spend any time on it, but kind of another way to show, other than the one fact that in 2017-18, you dropped below that line. That was the year the debt was issued, and the district received a premium, which only could be used to pay debt costs. So it wasn't additional dollars the district had to spend on anything or projects. You got your 84 million, and that was it. But those additional dollars or what they call a deductible receipt. So it was a revenue that offset some of your expenditures, so it dropped you below that line. And that year, you didn't have any negative aid. And that's the type of thing we're trying to duplicate or replicate going forward in terms of minimizing your aid loss. So the basic idea of losing or minimizing your aid loss is to group the expenditures into fewer years. Because in the aid formula, there's a component that says you can only lose 15% of your prior year's aid. And we'll look at a specific example what that refinancing would look like. So in years you wouldn't have expenses, similar to what happened in 17-18, because you had that offsetting revenue, you wouldn't have that negative aid. And then if we group all your expenditures into one or multiple years, but fewer years, you will only lose 15% of your prior year's aid, and any expenditures that occur in that year beyond that 15%, you never lose aid on. And then a higher levy at a higher level in the years where you have no aid loss. And I want to make it clear, levy at a higher level within Fund 39. Right now, we'd probably, an example I'll show you, we're going to try to levy at the same or lower level than your current situation. But part of your levy right now is just making up for the aid loss. So you take that levy that's just covering the aid loss and you put that towards your debt and paying your debt down more quickly, generating some savings. The structure, the district would continue to levy annually into Fund 39. This is your debt service fund to pay principal and interest payments. The annual cost of the taxpayer would be at or below the current level. Interest payments would be scheduled on a semi-annual basis, but another component of this refinancing is that we would try to group through a defeasance your expenditures in the same years you're making principal payments. And it'll be clear in a second when we look at an example. And we'd have principal payments every 4 to 6 years. And again, you'd levy on an annual basis. So in years where there wasn't a scheduled principal payment, those dollars would be deposited into a segregated account. And we have talked with the district auditors, we've talked with DPI, we've talked with the district's bond counsel. Everybody's on board. The person I was dealing with at DPI is on an extended medical leave, so we've had to kind of switch, so doing a little backtracking and going forward. But we've had several conversations and we're in a good spot in terms of moving forward with this type of a refinancing. The reason you're able to accumulate funds for a future payment that's a few years off is because we're using taxable rates. If you use tax exempt rates, we would not be allowed to do that. IRS doesn't want you to issue tax exempt debt and then build up funds and earn interest. Now in this environment, interests are so low on the investment side it doesn't work, but in theory that's why that's not allowed. But since they're taxable interest rates on the new debt, that's allowed. And again, the funds would be accumulated solely for that purpose. They'd be in a restricted fund for only making principal payments. So by doing this, we'd be able to shorten the repayment of the debt. Currently, the final payment is in 2037. In the example I'm going to show you, we would reduce that final payment to 2033. And that's where part of the savings comes from. So then now we're looking at this chart, and this has a lot of little numbers, and I apologize. We did put it on 2 pages. It was on 1 page when we first put it together, and I said, that's definitely not going to work. So this is basically a projection of what based on your current aid form, percentages in the tertiary. It's your scheduled principal and interest payments, plus using that 45%, negative 45%, what that interest cost or aid loss cost is to the, and then so the blue, the combined levy before, that's your total cost between principal and interest and aid loss going forward. And we calculated that number so we kind of added a baseline to establish, well, what the new levies would look like. And we do have some flexibility there, and as we, if the district chooses to move forward with this, we'll provide, we can look at some different structures and see exactly how, is there a chance to maybe provide some nearer term tax relief and still generate a benefit. And there's some trade-offs though. Whenever you delay paying principal, you're incurring more interest costs. So here's what we're projecting the cost going forward for the district. Anybody have any questions on that, how the aid works? You know, these are your principal and interest payments. This is what the schedule is. We didn't have to do anything with that. It's just that aid calculation. Now, if something would change at the state level where they would eliminate tertiary aid, I know it's been discussed for building projects. There's really no risk by doing this because you're getting that point. It would just reinforce that you wouldn't lose aid. Actually, there's a proposal to reduce that hold harmless to 10%, which would make this approach even more beneficial to the district in terms of you only can lose 10% of your prior year. So that's in the budget. So we don't really see anything from a legislative standpoint. So now we even get more numbers onto one page. So first off, I'm going to start right here where it says the $90.98 million taxable refunding issue. Some of you might be going, well, we only owe $79 million remaining in principal, but you also owe $30 million of interest, and a portion of that is locked in. There's nothing you're going to do. So to pay off the old issue, we have to pay off all the principal and the interest that's before the call date. Again, it's callable in 27. So those payments are locked in. There's nothing you can do at any point to eliminate that obligation. So we have to refinance the remaining principal plus the interest that you have associated with that. That's how we calculated that new dollar amount. So, and you can see the principal payments. We only have 4 principal payments scheduled in the new issue, if you see that column. And then you'll see interest payments, but they're in a lighter color. We're taking some of your levy in the years that you have principal payments and prepaying that interest. And this wouldn't be done all at once, it would be done over time. So if we called debt or something like that. So what we want to do is pay the interest in the same year you're paying the principal, because you're going to far exceed that aid loss of the 15%. Again, because anything you spend beyond that amount is a positive for the district. It's zero aid loss on those dollars. So that's the principal payment and the interest payments. And then the hypothetical defeasance, that's the amount going towards pre-funding your interest payments. And again, those would be done every few years, so we can always make the determination, does it make sense or not to do, or do you just make your interest payments just as they're currently scheduled. So if you drop down the yellow column in the middle, by doing this, we are achieving some interest savings, about $1.4 million. Now, on a present value basis, it shows a negative because you're paying the debt sooner, and on a present value calculation, it says dollars in the future are less valuable than dollars currently. Since you're paying them in more current dollars, it's a negative PV savings. We're required to show that calculation. But at the time you went to referendum, you did not discuss the cost on a present value basis. You talked about your principal and interest and aid loss. So I think the $1.4 million in interest savings is significant. The next column, the green column, this is the aid impact. So when you look at these numbers, negative aid impact numbers are positive for the school district. It's a negative cost. When they're positive numbers, it's a cost to the district. So if you look at that series of columns, you'll see that there are several years where there's negatives. And this is using the same percentage we used before, the 45%, because your expenses are reduced by $10 million, $9 million, $8 million, depending on how we structure it. So there's no aid loss in those years. And then in the years where you can see the 2.5 positive number, that's an estimate we put in there to say, well, that's your aid loss because that's the year we're spending, we're prepaying interest, and we're making your principal payment. And if you go back to that 15% calculation, if your aid, it's a conservative number. If you only can lose 15% of your prior year's aid, that means your prior year's aid was $16 million. You've never had aid that high. So it's a conservative number. Your aid right now is about $11.6 million. So if you take 15% of that, your aid loss would actually be less than 2.5, but we wanted to be conservative in that projection in case things change in the years that you actually spend the dollars. And if you actually ever get to $16 million, we're levying a lot more and prepaying more of this debt anyway. So, but the bottom line is, you can see at the bottom of that column, it's just under $20 million negative. That means you'll receive, actually on this new issue, as opposed to losing $50 million in aid, you'd actually receive, your net benefit is about a positive $20 million, which means about a $70 million benefit over what you're currently doing with this new structure over the life of the debt. Now, I think at the Finance Committee, I did talk about, I worked with Pewaukee and Wauwatosa on their recent referendums. We didn't do this exact structure. We did something similar. This is actually a little bit more beneficial because there was some GASB changes in terms of the accounting, which actually don't even, that got us thinking this way, but actually don't even play into this because it's kind of a non-factor. We're not dependent on an accounting rule, but it got us thinking about the segregated account using taxable interest rates, because obviously we tend to think of using tax exempt rates because they're lower. But because of where you're at in the aid formula, it's beneficial. But we did some other things in Pewaukee and Wauwatosa that had same goal as trying to reduce that aid loss because of where you're at in the aid formula. So in terms of what we need to do next, we've talked to bond counsel, we've talked to auditors, we're working to confirm with DPI. I guess, again, the person I was working with, she's out, so we've kind of had to circle back, but we've had positive conversations with them. We're working on the segregated account, working with Quarles and Brady. And again, I want to make it clear, too, that the district has not incurred any cost while we go through this process. So if you decide to do nothing, you're not out anything. If you continue to explore it up to a certain point, you're not out anything. You know, our thought would be is to have the board approve the segregated account. Again, it's within your books, within Fund 39, your debt service fund. It's just a separate bank account with more restrictions on it. It would show up as restricted funds in your financials. Have the board approve that resolution establishing that account the month prior to potentially bringing the district a refinancing issue to approve. I think it would help the sale to have that mechanism already approved versus just saying, well, the board's planning on doing it. If it's actually there, and again, it should be a fairly simple resolution, at least in my mind. We'll see what bond counsel comes up with and see how simple it is in the end. But it should be. We've had plenty of conversations. But then obviously work with us, you know, in terms of looking at the various structures that I had indicated. You know, we can provide maybe a little bit more relief up front if that's more of a priority and give up some longer term savings, go for the maximum longer term savings. But we can look at those options if it's something the board and the district wants to pursue. So with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Okay, I'll start. Just to clarify so that I think we're all on the same page, what you're telling us, if we redo the refinancing the way you're describing it, we would gain an additional roughly $20 million in state aid over the term of the loan.
You would gain over $20 million on the new issue, and you would alleviate the loss of $50 million of aid on your current issue. That's where the $70 million net gain comes from.
$7 million.
70.
70.
70.
So we have a $70 million net gain.
Correct.
And that would be a $1.46 million savings for the district over that time?
No, it would, the 1.4 is strictly the interest savings.
Okay.
The aid savings is 70 million. So
and most of that would go towards saving local taxpayers?
All of it goes to savings to local taxpayers, because these dollars cannot be reused for any other purpose.
Okay. So is there any savings to the district in all of this?
No. From an operational budget standpoint, it will have nothing. Now, however, if there's certain, when we work with districts, we try to understand what their overall financial goals are on the operating side as well as the debt. Obviously, we work mainly with the debt, but we also work on the operating side. So a good example, we just did a debt issue for St. Francis School District. Actually, I'm supposed to be at that meeting as well tonight, but they said I didn't have to go. They had a debt issue plus an operating question for operating needs that passed. And the question was a 5-year operating question. So we structure the debt because to create a drop in the debt that at the end of the 5 years, when they most likely will or potentially could go back to the voters to renew that operating question, there's a drop in the tax levy when they might be asking for more money. So we do try to take those things into account. So if there was some initiative the district was considering, I'm not saying you are, but if the example would be if you were looking at trying to generate additional operating dollars, we try to structure accordingly. But in terms of this transaction, it's 100% taxpayer savings.
Anyone else? Bob?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful saving our taxpayers, our constituents, $70 million over the life. So great job on that. But I got a question for you. I like the spreadsheet that you have here. What if we don't track the way it's projected? What do we do?
Well, and what we're looking at is to have, and we haven't had the detailed conversations yet of some of the options. So what we could do is have these deposits made into this restricted account. You know, we'd have some principal payments, so maybe we lower the levy targets that are in this and make it optional so that you could levy more if the criteria hold true. Now, the aid formula has been, as you know, with the tertiary since the mid-90s. As I stated earlier, any legislation that the only component really that would impact this in the governor's version of the budget would actually only improve it. It would reduce the maximum aid loss to 10%. If they increase, if your negative aid percentage increases, but yet they keep the hold harmless in, which I think, like I said, if anything, there's been an effort to reduce it, it would only make this better in terms of your savings. If they eliminate the negative tertiary aid completely, which was discussed at one point for construction projects, then you'd want to do this anyway because you're paying your debt down more quickly. The fact that we've come up with a structure that doesn't depend on an accounting regulation or GASB statement to make it work, it's really independent of that. We've kind of eliminated that. So so one of the suggestions or one of the ideas we have is, getting back to your more maybe specifically, is we structure it so we're not paying quite as much principal as early, so the levies are a little bit lower. So if the factors don't come out exactly what we think, or there's something that we don't foresee, you're not required to pay it back at that same time period. But if they do, then you'd have the option of levying more and paying the debt back more quickly. We'd have some call features put in, some flexibility. I think once if we get to the point where we can just look at different structures to see what they do and don't do and what the pros and cons are, I think that might make some of those things a little bit clearer.
When would you be wanting to flip the switch on this thing?
When everybody's ready, when everybody's nodding. Obviously, rates are good now, and obviously that's still a component whenever you're issuing debt. But because it's a new concept, we have bond counsel and the auditors and DPI all kind of in agreement. I think the next step is looking at some different structures, seeing what it means to your taxpayers near term, long term, and maybe finding a balance. And then as we go through that, maybe spending more time saying, okay, if this happens, what's the outcome to the district? If this variable changes, what does this mean for what we're trying to do here? And understanding it completely. So we're not in a hurry. You know, we think rates are going to be favorable. And again, the nice thing about this is it's not very interest rate sensitive. The bulk of the savings comes from the aid formula. I mean, $1.4 million, $1.5 million in interest savings, that's tied to your interest rate, well, that and paying the principal back more quickly, but the bulk of the savings comes from the aid formula. And then actually in a strange way, if rates move higher, when the money's sitting in the segregated account, waiting for the principal payment, you almost want higher interest rates, so you're earning more money on that money while it's sitting there waiting, because the dollars you earn on those dollars while they're sitting there in between principal payments contributes to your savings as well, because a dollar in interest you earn is one more dollar or dollar less you need from the taxpayer. So, you know, I would think, you know, if we, you know, come back in a month with maybe the structure of the account, and if the board was comfortable adopting that, because it doesn't commit you to anything at that point as far as refinancing, you know, but if not, do that in August, and over that time period, look at some different options, and then maybe look at September, October, in times potentially of doing something like this. The other component too in that time period is, hopefully, and I think we will, we'll have a state budget that'll see if there are any other changes to the aid formula, at least in this biennial, that we might want to factor in. If they do drop the hold harmless to 10%, this only makes it better. That's the only thing we've seen in the budget, but that should be in place before we do any action to see if there's anything in that, from that standpoint, that might cause us not to be as attractive. We don't foresee anything, but it's just another benchmark to look at.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, two questions. One, would the benefit to the taxpayers be almost immediate? And over time, would they see fluctuations in the savings, which would to them look like, oh, it increased this year versus the previous year, when they're looking at the school portion of their property tax bill?
Those are the options we'd look at, because again, depending on the structure, if you want to provide more immediate relief to taxpayers, which is always nice when you can incorporate it, that means you're delaying paying some principal, which means you're going to incur more interest cost. But again, with this structure, the interest component is secondary really to what we're trying to do as far as the aid. So it really comes down to what the priorities are of the district, or if you establish certain goals to say, we want to be, every year we want the levy to be $500,000 less than what our current issue would cost us. We can do that. Or if you say it's, there's a breaking point where, it starts to eliminate some of the benefit. But if there are some things you'd like to see or a structure you'd like to see, we can try to produce it for you and kind of walk through the pros and cons. So this structure was trying to just mirror what the taxpayer's obligation is on the existing issue and eliminating the debt more quickly. We shortened it by 4 years. If you'd say, well, what if we just keep and have the debt paid off in 37, the same as it currently is, what type of annual taxpayer relief could we generate by doing that? We could show you that. But those are the trade-offs. You're going to maybe lose the interest savings, the $1.487 million of interest savings, by pushing principal out. But we most likely would still achieve the vast majority of that aid savings.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to move to approve Director of Business Services and Robert W. Baird to start the process of refunding our existing debt.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion further? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like you got work to do.
We do.
Okay, moving on to E, discussion and action to approve 2021-2022 preliminary budget. Brittany?
Sure. In front of you today is the preliminary budget for the next school year, 2021-22. I like to, or school district should approve a preliminary budget before any expenses start on July 1st. We shouldn't start spending money July 1st if it has not been approved by the board. So a preliminary budget, because the state is not done with their budget, is the best thing that we can do right now. So I'm coming to the board to ask for approval. This will change. This is just a preliminary budget because there's so many unknowns at the state level. If we get more funding, obviously the revenue will change. If we don't get more funding, we'll have to look back at this before the annual meeting. But a final budget will come to the full board and the community at the annual meeting. So this is just the next step in the process. When we first started the budgeting process back in January, we were estimating about a $2.75 million deficit. This is due to, as you know, our funding is connected to enrollments. And districts across the state have seen a decline in enrollment. So it's on a 3-year average. There is something in the state this year that says that they might allow us to use either next year's as our 3-year average or the previous year as our 3-year average. Then you wouldn't have that drop that we had this year. It doesn't look like that's going through, but they're still talking about it. So if that is, that would change our budget. We were planning at the beginning to put $250,000 into our fund balance next year, but due to all the unknowns in the COVID expenses that we've had, that was removed from the budget that I am bringing forward today. So that leaves us with about a $2.2 million deficit, in which then we brought options to the committees and the board, and very many difficult decisions were made, but we were able to reduce our expenditures by an estimated $2.1 million, which leaves us about $126,000 left to not have a balanced budget. I'm comfortable with having a preliminary budget that's not balanced by that amount right now, just because we don't know what the state is doing. If they give us more revenue, that will go away. If they don't, I don't think $126,000 is going to be that much of an issue to find before the annual meeting. So I listed in your summary the areas of expenses that we reduced, as well as some areas of revenue that are built into the budget. Again, also in your summary are some of the assumptions. We did build 1.23% or the CPI in at the front end. For budgeting purposes. We did put $400,000 in our capital projects. As you know, this year we did not have any Fund 41. We needed to decrease that this year because of budget reasons. So we're adding it back in, and the goal would be to increase that by $50,000 each year until we get up to the rate we were at in previous years. We do have an increase in health insurance and dental insurance built into there. Right now, there is no per pupil increase on the revenue limit and no per pupil increase on equalization aid, because that is what the state is saying today. So I don't want to build in imaginary revenue into the budget. So right now it is 0. If they're not going to allow us to use the next year or the previous year's enrollment, getting money in those areas isn't going to help us, because we're getting a declining enrollment exemption this year. So for every kiddo we get to count, we're losing money in that declining enrollment. So we'd have to get a certain amount of kids, which I don't think will hit that. So I'd rather get the students and lose the money this year. That would be difficult, but next year it will be beneficial if we had the students this year, if that makes sense. So every student that we get next year that we didn't have this year, we will lose $10,000 in revenue just because of the declining enrollment exemption. But to have those students and be able to count them in the following year will be beneficial for us. So it's a puzzle. And then As you know, we reallocated our debt, so we will not be taking any debt payments out of the general fund or fund balance. They're all going to be on the levy and levied in their appropriate funds. So that was done this year. I spoke about the declining enrollment exemption, and then we have a projected enrollment. Obviously, we don't know that until the first day of school or the third Friday count in September. So we have an average enrollment, and then we do have built in there a net decrease of 10 students for enrollment, because we are hoping that more students enroll in and less students open enroll out. We have a net of 10 decrease in this current budget. But again, everything could change and probably will change before the annual meeting, but to be able to start spending on July 1, I would like a budget approved, preliminary budget approved by the board tonight. Questions?
I'll entertain a motion.
I will move to approve the preliminary 2021-2022 budget as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Brian?
Bob?
I just want to thank you, Brittany, for all the heavy lifting that you've done, along with staff and administration. Some tough decisions were made, and the board had full visibility to that, and I just want to thank you for doing that. And I like how your comment was things will change, and things do change. But in the end, we'll have a balanced budget, and all will be good. So thank you so much for all you do.
Tom?
Yeah, my comments are kind of along the same thing. I appreciate all the hard work that you've done. That's quite a big deficit that you identified all the findings for us to come close to balancing it. You mentioned 126,000. You should be able to find that somewhere in the budget in order to approve it. I guess I would propose, I'd like to see a $200,000 deficit just so we can fully fund that SRO at Kennedy. If you can find 126, I'd hope you'd be able to find 175 or 200.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes. Thank you. All righty, we are on to closed session. The Board of Education will entertain a motion.
Oh, we have one
We
more.
have
One more.
Oh, I missed one, sorry. I already circled it. All right, F, discussion and action regarding resolution of authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes in the amount not to exceed $5 million. Brittany, that you again?
Yes. Coming to the board tonight, I've spoke previously on that we will have cash flow issues coming the end of June. This is similar to the cash flow shortage that we had last fall. So to be able to continue to pay our bills and our payroll, we are asking for a $5 million line of credit, and we would be paying that back. It's short term. We will be paying that back in August when we get our property taxes. This will happen again in fall again, and it's due to obviously not getting our last property tax payment until August, and we have a gap, and also the decreased in fund balance that we have that we will work to increase, and the more we increase that, the less we will have to go out for short-term borrows. But again, this is going to be a line of credit that will be available to us for a max of $5 million between the end of June and the end of August.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes in an amount not to exceed $5 million.
Second?
Discussion. I have one question. This seems different than what we've done in the past. Usually we borrow and get a loan, and I'm not sure I understand what a taxable tax is.
It's a line of credit, so in past you could do a traditional borrow in which we would borrow the entire dollar amount and we'd have it in our account and we'd pay an interest rate on that. If we would have a line of credit and we have $5 million available to us, we pay a lower interest rate on what's sitting at the bank still that we haven't pulled, and we pay a higher interest rate on what is actually we're using that we actually borrowed. So this is a smaller interest rate, because we're keeping some money in there for a period of time and we're pulling it in small amounts, than if you borrowed the whole $5 million and you didn't need it, because we won't need it all in one day, we'll need it over those 2 months, you would be paying a higher interest rate on the entire dollar amount you pulled.
Okay, so there is cost savings in this. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Okay, now, as I said before, we're going into closed session. The Board of Education will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to S 19.85 1E and F and G, Wisconsin statutes as appropriate, to discuss GEA negotiations and personnel issues. The board will take action in closed session if necessary and appropriate to entertain a motion to reconvene into open session to take further action if necessary and appropriate, and/or to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Roll call.
No, move we go into closed session pursuant to 19.851 E, F, and G.
Second.
All those in favor, or roll call?
Soderberg,
Yes.
Medved,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Borden. Yes. Barney,
Yes.
Pollock,
Yes.
Reineman, yes. We're in closed session at 8:45.
Thank you all for coming. Drive home safely.